anything, or do you need to?
Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the 170th Scientific Governance and Risk meeting here at MakerDAO. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online. I'm one of the governance facilitators. And yeah, welcome to our kind of main meeting. Once a week, we get together, give updates on the state of governance here at Maker, as well as talk about a few of the issues we're discussing and debating, both in the forums and in our Discord chat. So we'll lay out a few ground rules here before we kick off. First off, this meeting is being recorded, so do be mindful of that. Try not to speak over one another. With that said, we do encourage kind of open participation. So if you have a question, something that's relevant to what people are saying, please do feel free to speak up if there's a pause. You're also welcome to drop the question in chat, and we'll work on to it when the time is appropriate. Yeah, that's most of the housekeeping stuff. We do have like kind of a little agenda to get through, so I'll be trying to keep us on track there, but we will end with open discussion. So if you do have something that's, you know, a question, something on your mind, something you'd like to have discussed, but doesn't quite fit into our categories, I would ask that you try to save it towards the end there. Yeah, that pretty much does it. So I'll kick it off with the governance roundup here. This is where we go through what's happened basically in the last week since our previous meeting, and let you know how the votes have shaken out on chain. Fancy vote slide, gotta love it. All right, so we had a strong showing. Everything that ended the past week did pass. Most with the same MKR voting, the exception being the green light polls I have listed there. So just to give a quick rundown, we did have polls for increasing the dust parameters, as well as using the MakerDAO treasury to fund expenses. We had a poll to add the G-Uni DAI USDC2 as a vault type that passed, as well as a one-time payment to the GovComms core unit. Last two are the parameter changes presented by the Maker Open Markets Committee, and adding the Curve staked ETH pool as a new vault type. So some of these will be going in this week's executive. I'll cover that in the next slide. But for those that will not, don't worry, we'll be getting to them shortly as soon as the technical work is done. And just to highlight those two green light polls, we got the Monetalis and the Solid Block Red Frog digital coin. Both passed, slightly different numbers there in terms of our input scores. As a reminder, we take the positives and kind of subtract the against votes. Take the for votes and subtract the against votes to calculate the governance score there. So even if a poll is heading in one direction, it is helpful to vote on those, as that does change our prioritization. All right, flip through those enough, so we'll go on to the executive proposals. Last week's executive was one of the quicker ones we've seen pass, so that was pretty exciting. The delegates were on the ball, it seemed. It had changes including the WBTC and GUSD PSM onboard. Well, only the GUSD is a PSM. Sorry if that was confusing. But both those different vault facilities were passed and are officially part of the protocol now. We had changes to our surplus buffer and the DAI direct deposit module parameters. So take a look for specific details there. And we also had a number of core units get their stream set up, and a couple core units that have budget distributions. Tomorrow's executive, as a reminder, you can kind of follow the happenings as we're putting it together in our new spells channel in our Discord. And so far it's slated to include delegate compensation payouts, which we'll be discussing here in a little bit, the open market committee and the dust parameter changes I mentioned from the polls, as well as the G-Uni USDC DAI 2 onboarding, and that governance communications budget transfer. So take a look out for that. Should be posted tomorrow, and that's about it on the governance update. I believe next we're going to have the MIPs, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, all right. I can still remember the order. I'll kick it over to Pablo Blimpa on the forums as our MIP editor to let you know what's happening.
Okay, thank you, Peyton.
Hello, everyone. Pablo here with a MIPS update. So the feedback period for the new proposals must start on Wednesday the 8th at the latest if they are to make it into January's governance cycle. Remember that we have no monthly governance cycle in December, therefore no formal submission window and no ratification polls. And January's formal submission window opens on Monday the 3rd. So we'll just skip right into the stuff in RFC. Yes, thank you. So we have about 9 proposals in RFC right now. Most of them have been posted a while ago, and the newest editions have been highlighted in white, namely a special purpose fund to make Moloch-based SPVs. I'm going to try and share the links. I hope I don't fumble my windows here. James is currently looking for controllers, so if you're willing to be one, please get in touch with him. Controllers, by the way, are designers for the multisig that holds the funds for the special purpose fund. We also have the financial strategy core unit, whose mission is to provide financial reporting and analysis to assist the DAO in evaluating the financial health of the protocol, also sharing a link here. And a budget for the Oracle core unit, more specifically a budget to cover gas cost that I forgot to mention during my presentation last week, but share in the chat a couple of minutes later. Share a link to that one too. Regarding the rest of the proposals, I feel like they have already been discussed quite a bit. Delegation and the currently being trialed, the MIP 61 are going to be discussed on this call today. Yes, thank you. We also have a number of upcoming proposals soon to be posted in the forum. There's 3 new SES incubated core units and Maker Talent core unit, whose focus is recruiting talent for the Maker protocol, Chaos Labs, whose focus is to secure the protocol through robust agent and scenario-based simulations, and TechOps. We also have a special purpose fund bounty for developing a legal communications framework for soliciting, disseminating, and acting on legal advice. There's an upcoming new budget for the StarNet engineering core unit, which is entering its 2nd phase. You can take a look at its MIP 39C2 to see what that is about. And there's also the Collateral Offboarding User Notification Process MIP, which is probably going to be discussed on this call as collateral offboarding, and more specifically, setting a standard for communication and notification is one of the topics for today. So please, authors, remember that if you want your proposal to enter January's governance cycle, it must be posted in the forum on Wednesday the 8th at the latest. That is 6 days from now. Yep, I think that's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for the update, Pablo, and appreciate the changes there. So far, our last segment of the kind of governance update side, I'm going to kick it over to Artem with the forum at a glance update and let you know what's going on our forum.
All right. Hey, thanks, guys. Welcome to the forum at a glance. A weekly review of what's happened on the forums this week for the week of November 25th to December 2nd today. So let's begin with the top announcements. Acre Invest comes forth as a newly recognized delegate with many years of prior legal experience in derivatives and commodity markets to the world of DeFi and MakerDAO specifically. Acre Invest's mission is to help with capital markets and financial content. Join their Meet Your Delegate call coming up on December 8th to find more. Next up, the Real World Sandbox team presents their final deliverable for community feedback and discussion. The report contains research on credit types and collateral eligibility, setting up resilient and scalable processes, and includes their next steps going forward. Next up, Colby publishes a follow-up post to the previous discussion concerning range poll voting. Colby presents 2 steps for implementing a range polling strategy, reviews their gas efficiency, provides sample results, and proposes our next steps to take. Check out the post for a lot more data, documents, and information. And moving on to our top 3 discussions. Prankster25 announces that the new Silver team would like to participate in and expend efforts on improving how non-blockchain native companies could better interact and be more transparent with the community. Prankster25 is asking the community to help provide some ideas and commentary on what will be best for New Silver to focus on. Next up, Ace from Real World Finance seeks community feedback on a proposal to purchase additional ETH held by the protocol as strategic reserves to hedge any sustained spikes in ETH prices and GUI. Ace asked the community whether the DAO should purchase ETH as a strategic reserve to hedge gas costs, and if yes, then how much should be purchased in reserves? Finally, Bond Appetit, I like the name, Bond Appetit, a DeFi protocol for business loans, introduces themselves and submits a proposal to create a standard vault with a collateral ratio of 100% and a stability fee of 3%, which are roughly the same rates for low risk bonds. And moving on to our active signal requests. As we move ahead with future changes on the parameters for D3M, Primoz asked the community on behalf of the MOMC for some guidance on what should be the spread between Aave DAI net borrow cost and ETH-A, and what should be the D3M debt ceiling. And our next signal request, the Gov Alpha Core Unit would like to propose a change to cutoff value for delegate compensation. They introduce a performance modifier, which will result in a reduced amount of compensation at lower levels of metric, and ask whether we should introduce a performance modifier to the delegate compensation trial. That's it for the forum at a glance, verbally at least. Check out the forum post for a 3-point summary, some more announcements, discussions, evaluations, reports, ongoing initiatives, and help wanted. Thank you.
Right on. Appreciate it, Arnim. Great informative update as always. And yeah, do remember to check it out on the forum. Links to everything in a bit more detail than we're able to go into during the call. Awesome. So if we pop to the next slide, thank you, David. We're looking at our first kind of discussion topic, this being on delegates. Specifically, we're looking to talk about the compensation pilot program pilot. Like I mentioned, that will be coming out tomorrow on tomorrow's executive. So do keep an eye on that. I believe Gordon might want to introduce this topic. Hopefully not putting you on the spot there.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so kind of wanted to just give everyone a chance to kind of comment or sort of bring up any thoughts with respect to how delegates are going so far, how the compensation trial is going, or it's been started to going. So I'm going to kind of give a brief overview, I guess, of like where we're at, right, in terms of delegates generally. So we have, I believe, I believe 7 recognized delegates. Could be wrong, could be slightly more. We basically got 1 more this week though, which is fantastic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 now, and then like potentially 1 more. Once we've kind of done the meet your delegates stuff, which is good. Like, so one thing we were sort of like initially concerned about, I guess, is that we wouldn't be able to attract recognized delegates. The fact that we've are seeing sort of new people to the maker community come in and kind of like look at that as something they can do is kind of fantastic, right? That's exactly what we wanted. Yeah, so on the whole, I would say that that side's looking pretty positive. Whether that's directly attributable to the kind of trial compensation is kind of open to debate. I'm not sure sort of whether we can draw any conclusions yet as to like sort of the causes, right? But like regardless, it's good to see. With respect to the compensation, as Payne mentioned, we'll have the first batch of like delegate comp go outs in the exec, or be part of the executive proposal tomorrow. I believe there's only 4 delegates that we're distributing to this week. So we're leaving out, so some of them obviously are not eligible based on the current kind of cutoff for metrics, so like 90%. A couple of them sort of are eligible, but have not because they sort of started very recently, they haven't really accrued and don't have a lot of MKR delegated to them currently, haven't really accrued very much. So essentially going to skip payments, which are sort of like 50 DAI, just because for gas reasons, it seems a bit silly to spend on distributing 50 DAI. So we'll like roll that over into next month, assuming there's sort of those delegates have accumulated more. Yeah, and then we have a couple of delegates who are sort of receiving the full amount, and a couple that are sort of receiving close to the full amount. So we're going to we've got like a spreadsheet, and we're going to sort of do a forum post and sort of link the spreadsheet and make all that public and stuff before the exec. It will be linked and things. So that'll, all the sort of information things will be publicly visible. Yeah, like this hasn't been sort of all smooth sailing there. So the kind of initial plan to set the delegate compensation based on like a hard cutoff of like 90% on the metrics was probably a mistake in retrospect. Like we ended up with like, I think MakerMan has like done something like 89% for like participation, which is a little bit unfortunate in terms of the kind of rule, right? So we're kind of proposing to sort of soften that out a bit, right? There's a signal request in the forum now about this, and we should make it sort of more gradual kind of cut off of compensation as you sort of fall towards, as the delegates fall towards like 75% participation and communication. So yeah, that's kind of more or less where we are, right? Yeah, feel free to anyone to comment if they're interested.
Yeah, I think one thing that I find interesting about this development is that delegates themselves kind of have a natural floor for participation, but then like some delegates have kind of like a grander view of like a single recognized delegate. And I'll use GFX Labs as an example, right? Like they have multiple people on their singular delegate platform. So when you're delegating to them, you're not really delegating to like one person, you're delegating to like a team of people that are working on a few things, which is interesting and a higher level of participation than somebody who is like an individual trying to be an individual delegate, right? And so I think it makes a lot of sense to introduce kind of like a sliding scale of compensation in reference to, you know, your behavior and participation. So yeah, I really like where things are going. And I also really like the amount of engagement from the current delegates. I think it's been really helpful for the DAO. I also prepared some prompts if we do fall into dead silence.
Always helpful, so I don't start sweating on camera. Thank you, David. I know we have several delegates in attendance as well. Like if you have thoughts or things you'd like to share regarding compensation, that's probably like super relevant here, but also don't want to call you out individually in case you rather listen and learn.
I guess one question I had was, are there any obvious issues apart from this like 90% participation threshold? Are there any like other sort of things that are popping into people's minds that they have a problem with regards to delegate compensation?
Or just delegates generally, to be fair.
Yeah, that's actually prompt number 3. You know, what is the role of delegates?
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
No, it's cool. Like these prompts are meant to be kind of jumped in between, like whatever is the relevant conversation, right? So I think I mentioned this just super briefly, like recognize delegates as teams versus individuals. There's like kind of an emerging meta that delegates are almost in the role of overseers, even though like they definitely don't want to micromanage core units. A part of their responsibility is making sure that there is a high level of integrity with what is being said versus what is being done. So there is that aspect to a delegate. There's also this aspect of delegates being proactive starters on new initiatives. So a great example of that is what we're going to be talking about in the next discussion around the offboarding and communication standards for vault offboarding. A user came and kind of told their story first on the governance call last week, and then again they posted on the forum for reference, and it kind of produced this MIP that Paper Imperium with GFX Labs spearheaded, and then invited members of the DAO to come in and contribute to around what are these requirements, how do we codify our communication standards around offboarding. And so we see delegates also as these proactive starters. Ultra Shupi, for example, he's been proactive on so many of the signal requests for the last pretty much since Maker has started, or MCD at least, right? So I'm noticing that aspect, and then generally, like, I'm curious, outside of like overseers and proactive starters and I guess like active voters, what other roles do delegates kind of fit into, and what roles shouldn't they fit into? Like, should they be overseers? Or those are kind of some of my thoughts floating around the topic.
Yeah, I think some of those are maybe a little bit difficult to answer at this stage, right? Just in terms of what delegates should be doing versus what they are doing and all this sort of stuff. Like it's still pretty early, right? We've only had the delegates for a few months, and another thing is I think once we start getting more to get delegates and it starts, like the delegate landscape starts getting like a little bit more competitive, we'll start to see like kind of a change a little bit in sort of behavior in some ways, right? And then what the delegates are doing. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried about sort of kind of looking at the current situation and sort of extrapolating that beyond what it is, or assuming it's going to carry on in that vein, right? Does that make sense?
So you're worried about more disagreements between delegates in the future?
No, not worried about disagreements necessarily. Just like I'm not worried at all. Really. Like I think this is good, but like I think basically just the current state of delegates, it's not necessarily representative of the future state when we have more delegates, right? Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get that. And also that's evidenced by the fact that this month we had 2 new recognized delegates come and apply, right? We have Just In Case, and we also have blanking out on the name of the second one, but that just applied yesterday, right? So yeah, I hear you on that.
Yeah, I was just going to add that as a facilitator, I see we're moving in a really good direction here. I think, as Long said, it's definitely going to change over time. But David, to your point around proactive starters, I've had a number of the delegates reach out to me with questions. Some I've been able to answer, some I haven't, but it's forced me to reach back to the team and come back with responses. So yeah, no, I think it's moving in a positive direction, that having someone ask us questions and say, give perspectives on the protocol or other protocols, I think is really good. So yeah, very happy to have that dialogue. I'd like to make it more, or I'd like to see it be more transparent, which ties back to our mandated actor discussions and how that's going to evolve and involve delegates, I think is an important piece to move towards as well. But yeah, all positive for me. So I'm happy to see the delegates get more involved, and yeah, higher participation is always good. So thank you, guys.
Derek, do you have any cautions or like notes of mindfulness that you would like to share for, I don't know, would-be delegates, existing delegates? Like, are you noticing any kind of things that aren't being addressed or aren't being paid attention to?
Difficult to say. I don't know what I don't know, but at the moment, questions that hold us accountable to what we're doing, what we're working on and focusing on is really good. So yeah, nothing that sort of any caution at the moment, but I think, yeah, just focus on transparency, openness, discussion, bringing questions forward to us as, for me, in my case, as a facilitator, is all positive. And if I can point out, Shupi is always asking lots of questions. So yeah, that's awesome. I want to see more of that. It takes time from other things, but it's definitely 100% important. So yeah, really good to see. that happening from a couple of the delegates. So appreciate it.
And I want to second what Derek just mentioned. So I'm personally pretty happy with the current state of how delegation happens at Maker. At the same time, I want to stress what Derek is saying is that like transparency is very important and will remain important. I think we haven't gotten to the stage yet where because delegates are their power centers, that power might try and be abused. And of course, I think the setup in the beginning with the expectations that were set around transparency and the high standard basically by the delegates that we see today are properly motivating their voting behavior, etc. That created this really good environment, I think, where I have the feeling there is quite a bit of transparency right now. What I am worried about is that that may maybe not continue to be the case because there aren't really any guardrails in place that enforce it. It's encouraged, but it's not really enforced. So I think when it becomes clear, like how the power of delegate can be used and maybe abused, we'll probably see more interesting situations where conflict of interest start to play a role, where individual delegates choose to not be transparent about things, and we'll start to see the limitations of the current framework. But all in all, I'm personally very happy about the current state of delegation at Maker. I think it has improved things tremendously.
Awesome, thanks for that, Ryder. I know one question that has come into our anonymous question box, which great time to plug that if you haven't used it before. It is on the link to all of our governance call agendas still, I believe. Happy to share that as well. And one question that has come up is this idea of delegates voting on their own compensation, right? Something that has happened in the past and will happen in the future, assuming our present signal request does go through. That would be voted on in an upcoming poll, right? Kind of wanted to, I guess, talk about the Gov Alpha view and kind of the response in our setup around that, because it might be interesting to some on the call, while others think of other things they might want to discuss. But you know, it is like in many governments, right? There are special rules set aside for how and when representatives are allowed to vote on their compensation, and we don't have that in the protocol. And this is, you know, partly obviously to maintain this promotionless structure where anyone can set up a delegate contract, and you know, anyone can propose any change to make a protocol through our governance systems. So in part it is to preserve that, and in terms of concerns, there are like a number of actions that can take place when, you know, if people feel that delegates are abusing that ability to vote on their compensation. The principle, of course, being you can instantly redelegate or unassign your delegation, which hopefully is a pretty strong check on that type of behavior. The only other thing I wanted to say is I do think it's also important to keep in mind these are, you know, people who are being delegated to make pretty big decisions, you know, with billions of dollars of capital in the protocol. So while self-interest and compensation is like a concern, an area for corruption, certainly, you know, if you're not willing to trust a delegate with voting honestly and transparently and responsibly on that, you know, I might suggest you think about your willingness to delegate to them for other issues as well. So that was a fun little sign.
Peyton, I'm curious, how do governments and other organizations like deal with voting on compensation? Like, is there a special committee that is like created and there's like a sub-voting structure or something like that?
Sure, I obviously aren't an expert on different ones across the world. I can tell you here in the US, there are like several rules. There are obviously vary depending on what level of government structure, but pretty standard amount is like you can vote on a raise, but it won't take place until the next election cycle happens. There's also caps are fairly common, right? The increase is capped to cost of living or inflation adjustments, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I think we can do in the protocol to make it less of a problem. Like, it just hasn't been the highest priority to get sorted right now, right? Like, during the trial period, I'm less worried about like long-term. I mean, like long-term stability is obviously important, but I don't think we're gonna like lock ourselves out of fixing that later by not fixing it immediately, if that makes sense.
I personally think that compensation is one of the lesser risks. Like it's so open and obvious that like delegates have a great incentive to be reasonable. Definitely if they want to attract MPR votes, but there are a whole bunch of other things where delegates are impacted by their own decisions. For example, how the whole delegation system in itself works, how far delegates can and should go in practically being executives in the DAO. And this is one of the longer term risks. I think that might be more like creeping, but maybe more problematic is maintaining the power balance between core units on the one hand, delegates on the other hand, probably other power centers. Why would delegates ever vote to restrict their own power? I think that's the core question. And as I said, I think we started off with like really high standards and exemplary behavior, but it may soon become clear that there are certain things that delegates can vote for that would greatly improve increase their influence, or yeah, in general, as I said, determine like how much power they have. And I think that's a key question. Why would delegates ever vote to reduce their own power?
Definitely something to keep in mind. Thanks, Connor. Did I cut you off longer, Josh? I know you're next, so you're ready. You can go ahead.
Yeah, you go, Josh.
Josh, I think your mic is either muted on the non-Zoom side, like on your local computer.
Yeah, still muted, I'm afraid.
We'll give him a moment to sort that. You can say your comment there, Lon.
Well, maybe better to finish this conversation first. I had some comments on sort of where we're at with institutional and delegation, and also, well, potentially we can skip this, but like some future thoughts on compensation.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so someone raised the question of like, how do other political systems work with delegation? And I don't think there really aren't that many good comparisons out there, because with the MakerDAO system, maker holders can undelegate at a moment's notice. And that's a pretty unique feature of the way delegation works at MakerDAO. Most other political systems, once you delegate to someone, like they have that, they like in Congress, like they hold that office for 2 years, or in the Senate 6 years, and you're like stuck with them. But here at MakerDAO, you can undelegate at a moment's notice. So that's pretty unique, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and there, but I think like the challenge is that most delegators aren't actively paying attention. So unless there's like some big campaign on the forum or like controversy saying, hey, like, these delegates are kind of doing something that's probably not kosher, for lack of a better explanation or turn of phrase, but Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing that I wanted to comment on is what Wouter was talking about as delegates as power centers. And also just general governance representation of other parties at Maker. So, there's various stakeholders. It's not just, core units and delegates. There's also, a level of representation, I think, that vault users, DAI holders, and other stakeholder types at Maker, like, should we be considering other ways that they could be represented in the system or given power? And just generally, I had this kind of idea of like phantom, voting MKR. So it's not actual MKR. You can't like redeem it for MKR. You just have a certain base voting weight if you like own a vault, or if you're like a mandated actor, or and obviously this is kind of like a far out idea that I didn't really see talked about anywhere, but I'm curious about people's general thoughts on governance power and representation for other stakeholder types beyond delegates and regular MKR voters.
I could potentially talk for like the next half an hour on that, but like, so maybe it's best not to start and get into it. I don't know, like, yeah, I feel like that's maybe a larger conversation that we can cover in this meeting.
Yeah, I'm happy to just put it out there as like a seed and an idea, because I know that the meta of the governance at Maker is really like plutocracy. Like, you have to have skin in the game, in order to have some say in the governance. And my thinking is like, okay, like, all right, if you own MKR, yeah, you have skin in the game. If you're a delegate, yeah, you have some sort of skin in the game, but you also have skin in the game if you're a vault user. You also somewhat have skin in the game if you're a DAI user. So that's kind of like the root of my thinking with this idea. But yeah, happy to table it and talk about it on other channels and other times.
Yeah, if we wanted to like, if we want to do a specific meeting for talking about all this stuff, we can, because I can ramble on it for ages. But yeah, I'll just, sorry, Finn, I'll just.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just maybe quickly talk about the institutional staking thing quickly. Sorry, institutional delegation thing. Just that like Anchorage is sort of all good for institutional users to delegate. So I believe like a number of sort of larger holders are in the process of setting that up now. So the other thing to expect in the next sort of few months, hopefully on the outside, is that we see more MKR coming in to the delegates, and hopefully new delegates as well. So yeah.
Definitely, that's exciting, and always fun to see how it plays out. And yeah, David, we're always down to nerd out about governance stuff. So happy to set up a separate call or a different way to explore those ideas, because they're fun, and we're constantly kind of on the lookout for different ways to improve the system. So thanks for bringing it up. Feels like we probably maybe not exhausted is the right word, but we've covered this topic very well. So I think we will move on to our next one, which is collateral offboarding. If you've been around, you've known we've recently started kind of offboarding unprofitable collaterals as mainly been the main criteria, or collaterals that aren't seeing much use, might be another way to frame it. And yeah, obviously we learn as we do, we find different ways to improve. David mentioned the kind of testimonial we got last week in terms of how our procedure and our practice kind of affected people, and started us getting to think about what we could do to avoid that in the future, as well as systems for collateral offboarding that we could follow more broadly, so it isn't just delegated to the mandated actors. For the, I guess, a little bit of maker history, that was kind of the signal request and poll we had at this point probably a few months ago, that kind of said, hey, we should investigate offboarding these vaults, and we'll leave it to the mandated actors to try and sort out how and when and all that stuff. Obviously, this isn't as great for transparency, so hoping that we can have this conversation to talk about collateral offboarding more generally. I don't think I got a response, so you don't want to speak, I'll just take your silence paper. But I know you are putting together a MIP for collateral offboarding that's been shared on.
Oh
on the
yeah,
Discord.
I mean, I can talk. Yeah, so just working on on a MIP just to have like a communication process to users. Happy to actively seeking input from anybody that wants it. We're kind of on the second round. I'll probably put something up on the forum either tomorrow or next week, just to then people can continue to offer suggestions. It's not. I don't think it'll be anything terribly controversial. It's mostly shaping up to look like CES basically gets a checklist of and owns the process of running down all the owners of various media assets and communication channels, and give a period to communicate before actually getting people liquidated.
Awesome. And yeah, kind of wanted to highlight that, there's both a technical aspect and like a communication aspect. So very good to see that we're gonna, have a MIP that tries to just both, and looking forward to the community input and seeing where that takes us when it comes out.
Yeah, I'm
for
curious about one aspect of collateral offboarding that Richard's talked about in his post, mainly in his recommendations list. There was one recommendation about instead of offboarding the way we do, which is set the debt ceilings to 0, set the liquidations penalty to 0, and then start increasing the collateralization ratio requirement, which pushes all of the vaults into liquidation. So that's the way we currently do it. But his suggestion was what are alternatives for softer offboardings? And I think he recommended, hey, what if you did the opposite, where you do a 0 debt ceiling, 0 liquidation penalty, but you start increasing the stability fee, and then maybe later you could already liquidate people out, but why not just do it through the stability fee, right? So I'm curious, of anybody here, if anybody has thoughts on what might be a more ideal soft offboarding tactic, but also just to note, I do recognize that soft offboarding or taking longer to offboard does incur a cost, like an Oracle cost. So I'm also mindful of what can we do on the Oracle side for collaterals that are being offboarded during that time. Is there a way to down tune the Oracle costs in some non-disruptive way, given that liquidation penalties are 0 and the debt ceiling is 0? So yeah, a bunch of stuff there. Curious people's thoughts.
Yeah, so there's 2 questions there. So the first question was just exactly the same scenario, debt ceiling to 0 and liquidation penalty to 0. But then the question is whether or not you approach the liquidation point by either tuning the stability fee so that the stability fee goes up over time, or whether or not you just tune the collateralization ratio. And the obvious answer is the reason we chose the collateralization ratio is because it doesn't cost the user anything additional, right? So the stability fee increase is in a way, without being able to communicate with the user, they would just be blindsided by this additional massive sort of fee collection on their vaults. And so it would end up costing them more. It would be a bad user experience. And it would look like sort of predatory lending from the maker perspective. So that's the answer to the first question. I leave it to Nick or someone else to sort of talk about the second one. But although with the subtlety that if we're gonna, so the second question was is there a way to sort of take a lighter approach on oracles? That is, we don't have to update them every hour. And I think the answer would be we'd probably want to update them in the case where prices fell, but not when prices were increasing. So that would be the sort of answer there, but maybe I'll let Nick or Oracles take that.
Thanks for that, Nick. Chris.
Yeah. So we've started doing that recently for collateral types that we're offboarding, right? Where we kind of change the parameters under which we update them. Now, right, there's there is risk that the system takes on, right, for a particular collateral type, right? And we give those collateral types risk parameters based off of things like the liquidity in the markets, right, the volatility profile, and so on and so forth. So when you actually update the Oracle less, right, you are effectively having the protocol take on more risk. So it's kind of important that you for these for the collateral types that are maybe more volatile, you don't want to do it when the amount of outstanding DAI is still quite high, right? And that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, right? Because if we're offboarding, it means there's not enough DAI, right? We're not earning enough fees. But you could, for example, look at something like Uni, which I believe, and don't hold me to this. If the numbers are off, it's purely a good example. Is I believe there's about like 10 million DAI, right? But due to I think due to like 1% stability fee, right, we only make like 100K or something on it, right? Where if you know the protocol doesn't want to take a $10 million loss, right? That's significant, right? So changing something like the Uni Oracle parameters, right, is a little more sus compared to something like the loop ring token, where I believe there's only like, I don't know, like 50K or 100K or something DAI outstanding, right? So yeah, there is something we can do in terms of lowering Oracle costs during the offboarding process, but it has to be treated on a case-by-case basis. There are kind of there are factors, right, that would make us hesitate to do that.
Awesome. Thanks for the insight, Nick. Kick it over to Nikolai here.
Yeah, so my point is on a slightly different topic, which is that I think this is a more general problem that doesn't only like relate to collateral offboarding. Rather, I see it as an example of maker governance shutting off a service or feature of the maker protocol, or at least changing it dramatically. So that was also one of my inputs on Paper's MIP, was that I think we could even make a even more generic process here, because yeah, DOS limit increases as Payton wrote could be another one. But also in the integrations team in the foundation, I remember this Vox MIP came in, and we immediately knew that from our work with integrators that, you know, changing the par value in the maker protocol, that's not something that we should just go out and do, because we know that that would break a lot of integrations. So I think we need to take into consideration end users and integrators when we either shut off services or change them in a, I would say, not dramatic, but in a substantial way. So yeah, I think it's a more general problem, but I think we'll probably see it the most with collateral on offboarding.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that up, because in in literally the first prompt that I designed for this segment, offboarding vaults, what other governance actions require more proactive comms, right? And that's what you're hitting on. It's not just offboarding; it's also dust limits. It could be also changes to auction parameters, right? It could be a lot of things, and I think at some level, our team at GovComms, like, we want to do we are doing, and we have done to some extent, the entire mapping of the stakeholder ecosystem at Maker. But the next progression of that project is to take each stakeholder and to kind of drill down into them, into their individual like profile, and to identify, like, you know, what are the changes that affect this user type or stakeholder type most. Because also it's not necessarily users either, right? It could also be large holders, institutional partners, like people that are indirectly affected by MakerDAO changes. And so getting a good view on that is certainly like something that the DAO shall be working on.
See, Nadia, our growth facilitators hand going up, so that'd probably be a good one to come to.
Yeah, I don't know if Robert's here, but we were talking about this MIP on Discord, and Robert said something really interesting, that is that if we manage the life cycle of a collateral as a product, then this will be part of the process. When we onboard the collateral, when we offboard the collateral, like clear criteria to onboard it, when this collateral could be on risk to be offboarded, what are the next steps for the stakeholder in charge of that collateral, what we are going to do with the users. And also, if we raise the dust limit, for example, that's part of the life cycle of that particular product. So I think that was like a very interesting point of view, and I'm super happy about having the collateral score unit, because I think it's a good approach to see new collaterals as a product and like to treat it as that, and create that life cycle. And I think that will help us, like in the future. I guess that will take a couple of months, but that will help us with all these communication problems that we have now.
Hey, thanks, Peyton. I don't know why I'm having a Zoom moment right now, but yeah, there was a discussion going on earlier in the chat, and I really appreciate Paper you spearheading this and moving this forward. Now that my team is getting up and running, and Nikolai's doing an awesome job of onboarding from a technical perspective, the new engineers, I get a chance to turn my activities more toward these types of issues. And one of the things that I was mentioning earlier was that, you know, when we had this discussion, the way of like, should we, as we onboard collateral, is there a need to do a signaling process from the community to offboard, or is there something else that we should be doing? And in my opinion, once a piece of collateral is onboarded, it's really important that we follow a specific process in managing that collateral, communicating, and especially if we need to offboard it. And up until now, we haven't really seen or experienced collateral management as a product and following some sort of life cycle. So this also includes setting hopefully objective metrics up front when we onboard a piece of collateral. So this is how I'm looking at all of our collateral that is currently onboarded right now, and those yet to be onboarded. And if we're doing all of that correctly, I don't feel there'll be a need for a signal request in the first place, because we'll already be on top of this. So it's not a matter of trying to cut the community out. It's more about a matter of, once we get something in the pinball machine, let's be consistent on the way that we go through in managing our collateral, communicating to our stakeholders. And then if we decide to offboard a piece of collateral, following a very well published process to be able to do that. So that was really the net of the conversation.
Some really solid insight. Thanks, Robert. Good to hear the framework there, and I think we, kind of all agree that having processes in place is what makes us better, makes us more consistent. So happy to see those being iterated on. Noting that time. Go ahead, David.
Oh yeah, I just wanted also to tack on a note about kind of the culture, the cultural implications of this issue. So I know, like, we're as this group that manages the protocol, we're all very mindful of the numbers, the risk management, the operational efficiency, this, that. But I think that one thing that really makes standout companies stand out and successful companies really succeed is the amount of emphasis we place in our culture about looking after the end user. And at Maker, obviously, it's not super straightforward who the end user is, because there's many of them. there's, you know, Oracle users, beyond, you know, there's DAI users, Vault users, et cetera, but the point is that I'm trying to make is, you know, outside of our very technical and kind of like quantitative view on managing the protocol, we should try to be a lot more mindful about what our actions implicate for the end user, whoever that might be. And so, yeah, that's just a note I wanted to make.
Awesome. I was going to say, I'm noting the time here. We are a little bit past the hour. We try not to keep these things going on too long. So would do kind of a call if you do have other comments or questions about collateral offboarding. It's kind of nearing your last shot to mention those.
No direct comments on it, I guess, but just you know, I feel like we should maybe just try to get into the habit of, this is kind of what David was saying as well, but we should just get into the habit of thinking about like the possible outcomes of what we decide to do before we actually do them, right? Because like it's kind of predictable that this was going to happen, right? Like it wouldn't have taken a genius to predict that one of the outcomes of offboarding collaterals such that most users get liquidated within like a few days, you know, would cause those users to be upset, right? Like we probably should have got that, to be honest. So like we should, whenever we do anything, we should just try and like think it through, right?
Yeah, definitely a good call out there. And I don't know, that's one thing I appreciate about everyone's helped us put together like some of the documentation around parameters, you know, getting able to see like the considerations and trade-offs with them. And, you know, it's not just for when we change specific parameters, but when we have initiatives that we should really be approaching with that kind of advantages and disadvantages mindset. I'm not seeing any other hands or mics going unmuted. So we do still have some time, so we will get to the open discussion portion. I know if you're a long time listener.
I had one more thought about collateral offboarding that just occurred to me, which is, and this is related to the jurisdiction in which you sort of find yourself, but getting, let's say if you have a house, right? And you have a loan against your house, some sort of home equity line of credit, and then you don't pay your bills and your house gets repossessed and liquidated. You owe taxes in a lot of jurisdictions on that sort of liquidated portion because it's a gain. So offboarding through liquidation is actually like, there's some pretty bad tax implications depending on the jurisdiction you're in to getting liquidated. So that's another, just to flag it as something we may want to consider or figure out about the collateral offboarding process and how it may impact users. So.
Yeah, and that actually fits right into kind of like the thinking that I was having. Oh man, I'm kind of like forgetting my thread of thought. Never mind. I take it back. I'll share it in a minute if I could remember what I was going to say.
No worries, dude. Yeah. There might be more collateral offboarding stuff, but I'll go ahead and introduce the.
Oh, I do remember what I was going to say. Okay, so yeah, so I was making the point of like, how do we get other people with skin in the game or other stakeholder types like governance representation in some form or another. And I think like, yeah, like having more DAI users aware of having governance, even if it's not all, even if it's like 0.5% of DAI users or 0.1% of DAI users, that still offers like an important channel of feedback. Because, you know, like offboarding, like Long said, like this seems like something we could have caught. It was literally just, I guess, mindlessness and a lack of somebody, you know, putting it in front of somebody's face, and also just a total failure on a few people's parts, including my own, right? But I think that in general, opening up lines of feedback and communications to these stakeholder types is really important. And I think that's why we've always kept this governance and risk call public. I think that's why we're moving towards a model at Maker for our coordination calls that is a lot more transparent and open. You know, it allows people to request invites for like very specific initiative, specific like calls. And in general, yeah, I like that we're moving more towards this mindset. So yeah.
Awesome. Wow, managed to tap mute there. That was fun. Yeah, I think we're welcome if your things are tangential to collateral onboarding or related, feel free to pepper them in, but I will just introduce the open discussion section, since I know we often don't get all the way to that point. I haven't seen anything in the chat that's like struck me as a topic that wasn't related. But yeah, so if you have something you wish to discuss, some thoughts running through your head, questions about the protocol or governance in general, might be a fun time to ask them now.
It's cool. We usually don't have time during this section. We always cut it off.
Ooh, got some good side chat covered here. I don't know if anyone has a mic loose, perhaps.
Yeah, also if you have, if you're thinking of what you could ask during this open discussion section, you can look at the call agenda. I listed a few of like the relevant current events that are going on that we haven't talked about. So feel free to look at that list and see if it conjures up any questions or comments.
Go for it, one.
Yeah, I wanted to share a couple of the calls that we are having. One of them is we want to start a conversation about anything related to green money or clean money, I should say, probably a better term. So we invited Adam from Greenbit to actually have a conversation with us. So he will be in our call for Maker Explorer on December the 8th. And then also, and this is actually quite interesting, Layer 0 is leading these calls called Lex Maker, which we're trying to bring different DAOs and start legal research and talks around Lex Maker. So we will, well, we technically had for the pilot, we had the DAO Foundation some years ago, but now we're going to have the DAO Cooperative Research, I think it is. So it's Miles Jennings from A16Z and David Kerr from Corey LLC. So they've been doing some research about DAOs, and I think it's going to be very like general. So looking forward to those. And then, well, we have other calls as well, but I'll just let you check it out in the forums.
Those calls are also on the calls calendar, I believe. And if they're not, they will be.
That's great.
So does anyone want to like shill for or against some of the like MIPs that are up, like ACE's new CU or this Moloch DAO SPV one? I'm curious to hear people's thoughts on both.
I'm also curious to hear like the status of that legal self-insurance fund SPV. That was also an SPV, right? But yeah.
Yeah, Pablo saying in the sidebar that that one hasn't been formally posted yet, but it's been in drafting. And if you dig through the, I believe is on the Gov Alpha public Discord, you can probably get some alpha.
So I posted today in the Oracle's budget MIP that I mean, I haven't really thought this through, but I can see that we have almost $3 million worth of ENS tokens, and that's what we owe the Mega Foundation. So I was thinking, why don't we use the ENS airdrop to just get that out of the way? So we can discuss that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few externalities there, right? Like, I think this is the first time, or at least the first time from a major project that Maker got some big allocation of tokens. And do we really want to give off the image that we're just gonna dump your coins if you airdrop them to us, right? Like, so don't even bother, don't try to get us to participate in your governance, because we're not going to. On the other hand, I can't imagine that, ENS is reasonably valued considering how little money they actually make, right? So we could also just be dumping the top, which is something to consider.
Is it dumping if we give it to a nonprofit foundation?
You don't want to, I don't, interesting. So
Depends on the requirement.
I imagined when Nikolai suggested this, that we dump and then we give the resulting DAI to the foundation, right? Because our debt is denominated in DAI, right? If you were to give ENS tokens, right, with slippage and everything, it might be difficult to settle on a number of ENS tokens with the foundation that would make them say, okay, we're settled.
I mean, the number works right now, but as soon as you announce, put up a signal request that you're going to sell ENS, and then put out a poll that you're going to sell ENS, and then put out an executive that you're going to see ENS, you've got a couple of weeks where people are going to front run that, and you're not going to be able to pay off the foundation anyways. And then the price is going to bounce right back after the exec is passed.
Yeah,
As kind of a side note, are we going to get like an invoice or something from the foundation, some kind of documentation?
I mean, it's kind of the Dune analytics is the documentation. Like that is the straight up just ETH in, gas out analysis that comes straight from the blockchain. Like I don't think there's anything more concrete than that.
No, I meant like just in case there's like tax implications or something, like we're going to send 3 million, we should know, like make sure this is the foundation, right? It's dissolving.
Yeah. I think we can talk to them and get them to send us something, but the number, right, is highly dependent on when we actually when we would actually pay them, right, the date, because up until that date, right, we are just increasing our tab by pushing Oracle updates, right, constantly. So maybe we don't get one before, but we get one like after we've sent it. I don't know. I'm trying to read the chat at the same time here.
Yeah, I had my hand up just to sort of reiterate something that Nick had said at the beginning, which is this is the first time that a sort of major protocol has dumped tokens on another protocol. And I think that Maker is sort of credibly decentralized. And even if we don't have a huge stake or an interest in ENS in general, I think that we very well could be setting a precedent that would inform a protocol we would have a large interest in, right? So like maybe we want to do an arrangement with Compound or Aave or some other L2 or something, right? It would sort of be beneficial if we had some of their tokens. If we make the move to just dump the ENS tokens on the market, we run the risk of like telling all future projects that might give us tokens that's just what we're going to do. And I think in the meantime, if a good compromise to monetize it is what Long for Wisdom had sort of brought up in the sidebar, which is that we could actually create a vault type for it, inform a price, users would get a chance to use it. We get the vault ourselves, take some DAI debt, do whatever we need to. Maybe we pay the foundation with the DAI debt. But then, you know, we would have the ability to like actually take those tokens and use them and vote with them or something, right? So that's just an idea off the top of my head.
What's interesting, I was going to say, what's interesting about that is if we do end up creating an ENS vault, then other token projects will be like, hey, if we want to like get around the whole collateral onboarding process, we could just give them a sizable allocation and they'll probably put us at the front of the list. Like I see that as kind of like a dynamic that might be playing out if that happens.
Yeah, I'm gonna just do what Long for Wisdom has already predicted and just say that, yeah, that the Oracle cost would be prohibitive from doing that. Like we wouldn't save anything. We would bleed money.
Not if the amount was large enough. Maybe the ENS guys should dump like 27 million more on us.
But we wouldn't pay stability fees to ourselves, so there's nothing to offset the Oracle cost, right?
Yeah, but if this is actually like a serious discussion, we just said that dumping 3 million on the market, right? That there's not even enough liquidity to really do that at a competitive kind of price. So now our solution is to lever up on that and approach the ENS team, be like, hey, if you want to put a bunch of ENS tokens in our protocol, right, and that we cannot liquidate at all, well, then we would onboard you. I mean, at some point, it doesn't really make sense anymore, right? Like some of these tokens are just really, really premature and just need to build up like a good liquidity profile before you can do anything with them, right? Whether their treasury participates or not. So sorry, Long. I meant levering up on the risk, right? And to clarify what I meant by that is, if you say that, oh well, we can you know, mitigate the Oracle costs by, you know, talking to ENS and saying, hey, if you put, you know, 20 mil worth of your treasury in here and mint, you know, 10 million DAI or whatever, right? Then we can make you a vault, right? But the problem now is that the protocol is like, when I said levered up, I
trouble
meant
liquidating, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Would have trouble liquidating on that kind of scale.
Yep, I get it.
Yeah,
And
very good points, Nick.
I mean, at some point, like when we have really good on-chain liquid options, like I think we can do more of this stuff, right? But I think we're not quite there yet.
For the record, I'm still not in favor of dumping the tokens, just because of the precedent. I think we may get dumped. I think we may get dropped tokens that the DAO would find a major strategic advantage in the future.
Sorry, I agree with Mooney. I think it will be like a terrible message for the community that we are receiving an airdrop and of a governance token and we're dumping it. Like, no, we can't do that. Actually, right now, what we are seeing is that a lot of projects are proposing they give you tokens and you give them tokens like to close partnerships and things like that to have that in the treasury and have this skin in the game. So I will be like more that for me that will be more interesting, like to start thinking about having a treasury of the important partners with their tokens than dumping those tokens to pay for our costs.
Today I saw your hand go up first if you want to add something.
Yeah, thanks, bros. I kind of on the idea of actually not taking ENS outside of our hands. I'd like to know the general sentiment of actually using those ENS tokens to actually participate in their governance. I know that we already our own governance is quite taxing. We have a lot of votes. I think we all agree with the mission of ENS as a project. So I think it would be interesting for us as a large player to participate and be part of the decision making.
Thanks for that. I also saw Juan doing a hand dance.
I don't know what you're talking about. No, but guys, I seriously think that we should try to separate topics and instead of trying to mix everything in one bag and then decide, because that makes the decision making way harder. First, Nikolai started with, oh, maybe we can use this money that we almost found on the floor to pay these other things. So one topic should be how should we pay the foundation, et cetera, et cetera. The other one is what do we do with tokens. The other should be, should we participate in this governance thing? But we should try to avoid mixing topics, because then it's going to be impossible to arrive to any decision. So that's my two die.
We're not sure we're not really trying to come to a decision right now, right? I think we're just discussing options. So I'm kind of less worried about it going a little bit wide at this stage.
Do you have something to add there, Robert, or are you just testing the hand feature?
Yeah, I'm just testing my hand.
Oh, very good. Fun. All the fun things. When I was on a Chromebook, yeah, you didn't have these reactions. So just FYI, if anyone's thinking of downgrading. All right. If noting the time here, we've had a pretty full call with lots of discussions. So we'll give kind of a last call here. If something else you want to discuss this week, this is your last chance to bring forward. Right on. Well, thank you everyone for coming. We will have a regular call next week as well. I know as we sort of get into December, you will have to wean yourself off of these calls at least for a week or two. But look forward to seeing everybody in the future. Let's keep the conversations going in the forum and on the MakerDAO Discord. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.